everyone. This is Veronica Kirilenko of the New American. And today we're speaking with my neighbor from the Loudoun County, Virginia, a concerned father and an executive director of the organization called Fight for Schools, Ian Pryor. Ian, thank you very much for being with us today, and thank you for fighting the good fight. The fight for
Thanks
schools,
for having me. Thank you.
Of course, it's a privilege. So Ian, the fight for schools has been making national headlines for the last year and arguably was a force behind Virginia flipping red this past state elections. Please tell us a little bit about how and when the fight for schools started and which goals you tried to achieve.
Well, what really happened was back in March when you had a private Facebook group that included 6 school board members, and that private Facebook group was plotting against parents for speaking at school board meetings for a variety of reasons, from opposing the use of critical race theory in the school system to wanting to open schools. And something between 60 and 70 parents were listed in that group, and they wanted to infiltrate those parents groups. They wanted to publicly expose them and hack their websites and all kinds of nasty things. And you had teachers in that group, you had administrators in that group. And when you start putting people's names down like that, you're not just putting their names down, you're putting their kids' names down too. And so I think that there was already a groundswell of frustration and organization to try and reopen schools. So it really came down to that being an inflection point where I said, listen, I think what we need to do is create an organization that can focus on school board elections. Ultimately, one of the first things that we decided to do was to take the legal removal provision from Virginia Code and try and remove those 6 school board members. Everything that happened since then was sort of a culmination of that effort of gathering volunteers, of getting the community engaged, paying attention. And of course, the Loudoun County School Board really added, gasoline to the fire by doing some of the things that they did, whether it's, putting a teacher on administrative leave for exercising his First Amendment rights, shutting down public comment, arguably covering up a sexual assault to pass a political policy. And so I think that is really, what galvanized a community to come together and say, look, these are our schools. We pay for them with our tax dollars. These are our children. We don't, they don't belong to you. Essentially hire you to teach them. And if we don't have a say in how this is going, then we are going to push back and try and get a seat at the table.
Right. Ian, because of the parents like you and many other parents like you in the Loudoun County, the Department of Justice decided to treat such regular moms and dads who are brave enough to speak up against the mainstream school board policies like domestic terrorists. I think it's absolutely outrageous. And we know that it was a DOJ's response to the complaint from the National School Boards Association. And the NSBA insisted the Biden administration to apply the Patriot Act to the extremist parents who dare to yell at the school board meetings or call the members Nazi or Marxists for implementing CRT into school curriculums. Terrorist parents also argued, like you said, that schools should remain open and children should breathe freely, leaving the issue of masking, for example, up to parents to decide upon, and so on. And while the list of the NSBA complaints was very long, it missed the instances of the actual violence, like at all. And even though the association had later denounced this letter, the Attorney General Merrick Garland said his department and the FBI will continue to address the issue, which means that you are viewed as a threat. Why do you think they are so afraid of you?
Well, I think what they were afraid of was Terry McAuliffe losing the election in November. I think this was a political maneuver, plain and simple. Documents have started to come out that the White House, members of the Department of Justice and the NSBA were coordinating before the letter to the president. And, I worked at the Department of Justice. I know how long it takes to get clearance on attorney general memos. It certainly is not 2 business days. And so I think what you saw was an attempt to try and silence parents through fear, because really they don't have jurisdiction to go after parents. I mean, those are local issues. And if there are credible threats to public officials, then those should absolutely be addressed. They should be addressed at a local level, unless, of course, there's some kind of massive interstate nexus where, there are groups that are plotting these things, but there's no evidence of that whatsoever. I view the Attorney General's memo as more of a shot across the bow to parents than anything else. And the specific concerns in that memo was the use of the words harassment and intimidation. Those are extremely vague and broad terms that, clearly could have a chilling effect on people's First Amendment rights. And it's really surprising to see that the Department of Justice has not backed down from that, whereas several state school board associations have withdrawn from the NSBA because of, what was clearly a politicized attempt to sway an election.
Yeah, so it didn't work, this attempt to silence parents.
No, not at all. I mean, I think that, the majority of parents saw it for what it was and, just went about their business of exercising their First Amendment rights.
And it actually had an opposite effect on parents. Do you think it did?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at some of the reasons why the election turned in Virginia, I mean, you can point to three things, really. I would say the groundwork had been laid by parents, not necessarily to win an election, but to push back on schools. And so that became an issue, one of the top issues going into October. And then you had Terry McAuliffe, who, infamously said, I don't think parents should be telling schools what to teach. You had the Merrick Garland memo, which, clearly became an issue at the House Judiciary Committee meeting and hearing and the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. And, at the core, you had one of the instances cited by that memo was the June 22nd meeting in Loudoun County Public School Board, where Scott Smith was arrested. And he was really painted as one of the faces of, quote, domestic terrorism or, angry parents that are out of control. And we later learned that, he was there because his daughter was sexually assaulted in a bathroom, and they were there to discuss a bathroom policy.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about that, this story of the sexual assault against the ninth grade girl committed by a transgender boy in a school bathroom shook many parents across the nation. And it recently got obvious that the LCPS superintendent, Scott Ziegler, knew about the incident, and then he denied having any such knowledge, and then even tried to cover it up in order to advance the transgender bathroom policy. Are there ways to hold him accountable for that?
Well, certainly. I think that what's been made clear is that there was a sexual assault, a now judicially determined sexual assault that occurred in the bathroom. The individual was wearing a skirt. As for his gender identity, that's not clear. It's also not really relevant. The point of the matter is that this happened, and at the June 22nd meeting, Scott Ziegler said, I'm not aware of any records of sexual assaults in bathrooms, despite the fact that on May 28th, the day it happened, he informed the board that there was an alleged sexual assault in the bathroom. And now I've heard a lot of people saying, well, he couldn't have come out there and given specifics. Like, when nobody was asking him for specifics, if there was a record of an assault in a bathroom, he should say, yes, we do have records, but I cannot disclose the details of that, in an open meeting setting. Or he could have just answered the question and said, I cannot answer that question right now with any degree of specificity, but I can tell you that there's no pattern of it, because that's what the question was. So how can you hold the superintendent accountable? Well, ultimately, the individuals that hold the superintendent accountable are sitting on the Loudoun County School Board, and they have done nothing to hold him accountable. He still has his job. We're a month out of this story, and he is still employed. I can tell you that the faith in Superintendent Ziegler is less than zero. The faith in this school board is less than zero. And the only way that parents in Loudoun County are going to be able to trust their school system is that if there's a reset on this school board, if there's a reset in the superintendent's office, and that there's more parental involvement and collaboration between the school system and the parents.
Yeah, I know that a hefty part of your organization's activities concentrated just around that, the recall of the school board members who just not just promote a number of destructive policies and completely ignore the valid concerns of the parents, but have this real power over, electing the school board superintendents. So in October, one of the most odious members of the school board, Beth Bartz, resigned after your recall petition was filed. And this week you announced that you have filed the recall petition for the school board chairwoman, Brenda Sheridan, right? And you've got all paperwork ready for 3 more members. But as I know, according to the current rules, the vacancies created by recalled or resigned members are filled by the remainder of school board. Are you not worried that the spots will be filled by people just as irresponsible and arrogant and as their predecessors?
Well, certainly, that was something that we were very concerned with when they filled the spot to replace Leslie King, who had passed away this summer. But, surprisingly, three of the Democrats or, Democrat endorsed school board members on the board voted for an individual named Andrew Hoyler. And, I can tell you, I don't really know much about Andrew Hoyler's politics, but after watching him on the school board for the past 4 weeks, I think a lot of people are encouraged. He's responsive, he's transparent. He certainly appears nonpartisan and that he wants to do the job for which he was selected. So as we go into a selection to replace Beth Bartz, the hope is that, these same school board members that voted for Mr. Hoyler will once again do the right thing and appoint somebody, not that's Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative, but somebody that really wants to get to work, focusing on, excellence in education, meritocracy, giving every child an equal opportunity to succeed and reach their potential, not just the potential that, the school wants from them, but the individualized potential of each student.
So this is good news, I guess. This is very refreshing to hear and to have such people on our school boards. And also, there is some great news coming out of Virginia's Spotsylvania County School Boards, which unanimously voted this week to remove any literature that contains sexually explicit content from its library shelves. The order, was filed after a parent complained about the presence of age inappropriate LGBTQ content in the school's literature. Is your organization planning to advocate for similar changes?
Well, I think with the incoming Youngkin administration, you're going to see a lot of changes from the state and hopefully, Loudoun County, who has told us all summer that they're bound by what comes out of Richmond, will continue to be bound what's coming out of Richmond. I would hope, though I don't have my fingers are crossed, but I'm not going to hold my breath, that they do not all of a sudden shift to a position where we can do whatever we want, regardless of Richmond, because that would be very hypocritical. But I think that, things like what's in libraries, what's on teacher trainings, what are on classroom materials, those are things that really should be transparent, and parents should at least have the ability to understand what is in there and then take action when they decide that there may be something that's inappropriate.
The Biden administration is rather aggressively pushing COVID shots on children ages 5 to 11 who have recently become eligible, and is encouraging school districts to host clinics in public schools to provide COVID-19 vaccinations to kids. What's your opinion on that?
Well, again, my opinion is that comes down to an individual choice of parents. I know parents that have gotten their children vaccinated. I know parents that don't want to get their children vaccinated. And there's lots of different reasons that I've heard for not doing it. Some people want to wait and see what the side effects could be. I mean, this is a vaccine that passed in pretty much record time. And I know that there are a lot of people that are concerned. And, it's one thing to get vaccinated yourself as an adult. You take that risk, you can analyze that risk and make the decisions based on the costs and benefits. But when you're talking about your children, there's always going to be that protective nature that you want to be sure that this is not something that's going to have some kind of long-term impact that we just don't know about yet. Usually it takes 10 to 15 years to really know exactly, what happens in trials with vaccines. And so I think that everyone has that individual choice. They should make that choice. They shouldn't be shamed for the choice, whatever it may be. But the pressure to do so for kids from 5 to 11 I think is a concerning overreach of what the government should be doing. I think that every parent should be able to make that decision based on their own preferences and their beliefs and their understandings of the risks and benefits involved.
Well, thank you, Ian. And one last question. It's going to be of political nature. Virginia that supported Joe Biden, but by 10 points over Donald Trump in just a year ago, has just refused to support the Democrat Terry McAuliffe and handed the victory to Republican Glenn Youngkin. So what are your exact expectations from Glenn in regard to the public schools? And do you think that tomorrow's rally by Youngkin that is taking place at the LCPS's administrative building, well, rather by the building, right, is a clear indication of changes coming our way?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that there was a lot of hope that was validated with the election results with parents all across Virginia, but especially in Loudoun County. I can't tell you how many conversations I had with people as they were signing petitions that, if Terry McAuliffe won, they're either going to move to West Virginia, move somewhere else, or pull their kids from public schools. Now I think that there's more security. And I think that we're going to see things like, more charter schools. We're going to see more transparency. Hopefully we see a parent's bill of rights. School choice is certainly something that we can have a solid discussion about, and hopefully we see pass the legislature, if not now, then potentially in 2023 when you have state Senate elections. So there's a lot of opportunity to remake the education system, to make it more competitive, to make sure that we're not continuing to fall behind countries like China and Finland and Taiwan and Japan, and that we can have the best educational system, not only in the world, but here in Virginia, in the country.
Well, thank you very much. I truly appreciate your honesty and your vision, and for fighting the good fight. Thank you, Ian.